Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Civic Dialogue event. We're just giving some 5 minutes to just allow a few people join in, and then we'll kick off immediately. Thank you for joining in, and thank you for finding the time to join this very important conversation. The Civic Dialogue is organized by the Global Shapers Community, Lagos, in partnership with the Youth for Nigeria and We Vote organization. We promise to have a very insightful conversation as we kick off. Just a few more minutes just to allow one of our speakers come on, and then a few of the attendees come on, just 5 minutes, and then we'll start. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And I think it's a good time to start because of time. I know some of our other speakers will need to drop off at some certain point for other engagements. I want to formally welcome everybody to this event. My name is Wisdom. You want to confirm you can hear me clear? Please use the chat box just to let me know you can hear me clear, please. So my voice is good, so you can hear me. You can use the chat box just to alert me you can hear me. My name is Wisdom Chap Jumbo, and I'm Vice Curator for the Global Shapers Community Lagos. And as I mentioned earlier, we are organizing this event in partnership with our very good friends at Youth for Nigeria and We Vote. They have been our very strategic partners as we plan this event over time. So thank you so much for joining. This dialogue is a symposium for the future of Nigeria. As its target is because we want to have conversations that will help young voters who have signed up to make very informed decisions as we go into the general elections. And yes, the election is very important for 2023 because the youths have made a large population of the voting strength. So that's why we're having this, and I'm very happy a lot of young people will be on this, and hopefully the conversations we'll be having will help many of you understand what is at stake as we move on into the elections and prepare. So without much ado, I would like to invite the curator of the Global Shapers Hub, Lagos, to give us his opening remark and also talk to us more about the event and give us some speech. Hello,
Right.
Babajide. Yes, go on.
Yeah, thank you, Wisdom. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Claire.
Okay. You can see me as well, right?
A bit, but I think we can see you clearly. Okay. Yes, we see you now. Not too great, but we see you. Yes.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, panelists, to the audience from different parts of the world. I bring you good tidings from the good people of Global Shippers community in the Lagos hub. And let me start by reminding us, I know we know, right, that another election season is upon us. And this is why we are here. And this is a time for us as Nigerians to demonstrate our civic duty to decide the future of our great country. Historically, the number of voters that turn out for elections in Nigeria has been relatively low. For 2019, we have 29.1 million people voted out of 84 million people that are registered to vote. And now another election season that is here, we consider this not to be a good way for us to really position the country in the view that represents the interest of many Nigerians. And then we ask ourselves, 2023 is here. Do we have any reason to be hopeful? Over 10 million new voters were registered as a result of the largest ever participation by young people in Nigeria's history. And this is according to the Independent National Electoral Commission's continuous voter registration process ahead of these 2023 general elections. This turnout demonstrates unequivocally that Nigeria's general election in 2020 have a significant impact on its future, with an estimated 70% of voters determining who would serve as the country's leaders at all levels. This symposium by the Global Shippers Community in partnership with our good friends at Youth for Nigeria and We Vote, is part of our efforts to strengthen civic engagement, promote leadership growth, and drive social change across the nook and cranny of Nigeria. The Global Shippers Community Lagos Hub is an initiative of the World Economic Forum, which is focused on driving dialogue, action, and change across communities. And civic engagement is one of the core pillars of the Global Shippers community worldwide. This event that we have here today is important for us to know that it's entirely non-partisan. We will not discuss or endorse any specific candidates. Instead, our objective is to bring together policymakers, change makers, political leaders, civic society leaders, and even representatives from the Independent National Electoral Commission to put the elections in the context of ongoing social economic issues that we experience in the country, and ultimately highlight the importance of informed voter participation. And so we might ask, why are we doing this? And what do we hope to get out of it at the end? First, we want to promote civic participation among citizens, young and old alike. We want to educate citizens on the 2022 Electoral Act and how it affects elections. We want to shape the narrative on what citizens should expect from the next president, governor, and every other political office holder across the country. We also want to educate citizens on the role of other political office holders aside from the key offices like that of the president and the governor and the other high-ranking positions. We also want to encourage and promote grassroots civic participation. And we want to educate citizens on the economic significance of the next general election and how it impacts the livelihood and well-being of each and every one of us. Basically, we want to inform, educate, and sensitize everyone that is eligible and permissible to vote in the upcoming election. And so my charge to us today is simple and clear. But before I get into this, I want to remind us, over the years, a lot of Nigerians have become so interested in voting during elections because they feel their votes won't count. However, we must not stop fighting for a better country. We must all come out to vote and take a step toward improving our nation. Complaining isn't a strategy. Hope, on the other side, is not a strategy. But voting on election day and also holding political office holder accountable, that is a strategy. We have to understand that our one vote can make a big difference. And if you think it doesn't, ask yourself why politicians are ready to go any length just to get that one vote from you. There are millions of children whose future depend on a decision that you and I, or that we all collectively will be making today, tomorrow. We have a responsibility to do all that we can to give them a better country by going out to vote. God bless you all, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Babajide. That was powerful. That was powerful. Thank you a lot, and you made very very important points as you spoke. Thank you so much, and very key reason why this conversation is truly and really important. And I sort of agree with everything you said. And just to, as we go into the next session, I also would like to mention that we didn't do this alone with our partners. We are also enjoying the generous support from Nigerian British Chamber of Commerce. If not for the Lagos Marathon today happening across Lagos, we're supposed to have this event physically at the Nigeria Chamber of Commerce Plaza in Lekki 1. That's to show their generous support and the importance of this kind of conversation, reason why they are supporting it. So I would like to also mention and thank the members of the council and the chamber for their support. They also leverage us this space on their Zoom to make sure that this conversation happens, even with all the limitations we almost experienced with accessing major roads today because of the Lagos City Marathon. So please, Nigerian British Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much. Then, just to buttress a few points, Babajide, highlighted as he was speaking. If you are aware, INEC have said a total of 9,500 and 18,000 valid newly registration voters, registered between June and July. And those registrations were aged between 18 and 34. I mean, we're young people representing 76% of this number, and that is huge. It means that the youth will determine the outcome of the 2023 election, and that is very important. More than any other time in Nigeria's history, that is very key. And INEC also, looking at broadly the voters registration for the election as we go in, which is looking around 93 million eligible voters. I mean, young people now will make up a large chunk of that number as we go into vote. And just in case you don't know, across the country, we have 176,846 polling units across the country. And I'm sure you already know the polling units where you are going to vote. If you don't, we have an INEC person on the call today who buttress more on those numbers for us. So Babajide already spoke about why we're doing this, so I'm not going to go in much on this area. But just to put it out again, one key objective we are trying to achieve with all of this, that's why it's going to be very engaging. Try to ask your questions where you need to, is ultimately to promote one civic participation among young citizens, but most importantly, help you make informed decision as you go into the election. All right, so without much ado, I would like to move into the first panel conversation, and I already have my panelists here. Thank you again one more time for finding time to join. Though one of the speakers is having an issue joining, we really cannot tell what's happening, but we're working with him back end to make sure that is resolved. So that person is Mr. Bolahan Olojide. Hopefully he joins us as we go on in the conversation. The first person I would like to invite, aside who is on the flyer, is the head of gender unit at INEC. She is Mrs. I want to get the name correctly, so let me look at my notes. I wrote it down just to make sure I get it correctly. All right, Mrs. Fortune Mbamalo. She's head of gender unit INEC Lagos. Welcome to the conversation, Ma. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you hear me, Ma? Okay. Just checking if she's on. She was on a minute ago. Maybe network. All right, we'll move on. I would like to also call up Timi Olugunju. He's a barrister and he was Africa representative on the advisory board of International Republican Institute, Generation Democracy. He's very vocal on what has been happening with the elections, and also he's an advocate for policy, and he's lead consultant, public policy and regulations and government relations for Spide Side. Mr. Timi, are you on the call? Yes, you are.
Yes, I am.
All right, great. Okay. I would also like to invite Adekemi Adefisayo. Adekemi, among other things, she is a social impact specialist, and she's been working in the space also to help a lot of entrepreneurs understand the space. And she's also political savvy, and then she'll be joining this conversation to also give us a perspective of, how this is also going to, women participation and all of that in the election. So she will be joining that conversation. Adekemi, are you on the call, please? Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome. All right. So as I said, Mr. Bolahan it's taking some time. I don't know what the issue is with the Zoom, but hopefully he's going to join in shortly. But just to give more, insight on this first panel conversation, so most of you would sort of understand. This session we are going into now, it's the sprint and marathon. It's a shift of the political order. What are we trying to say, basically? Let me share my screen. I think I pulled that out before, so you can see more on that. Sorry. Okay, so we are talking about a shift in the political order, if that is possible. Like we have already spoken about the importance of the general election, we would like to highlight the various political parties who are ready to rule, who are preparing to rule or to lead in this election, or who are leading already, and their ideologies, manifestos, policies, campaign. Just to discuss, how their readiness is to sort of try to lead in this conversation. And my first question, if I would start, we would go to Timi. Timi, welcome, and I'm happy to have you. Just to get your thoughts on what is happening. Many have said a political revolution is not possible, but what we are seeing now, do you think we are actually on the right path? Is this just a sprint for us, or do you think it's a marathon itself? And how ready do you think the political actors are with their manifestos and ideas towards the election? Do you have any concern, or how will you describe it? Timmy, can you hear me?
Yes, this is what we call a barrel loaded or loaded barrel question. But basically, let me take the pointers from the question, which is the fact that our readiness as Nigerians. And one of the key parts to that readiness is both the citizens' readiness and institutional readiness, right?
I agree.
And so by institutional readiness, my reference is to the MDAs, the key vehicles for driving the process, right? The ministries, the departments, the agencies of government that are clearly responsible for driving the process or that are partly responsible for that process. And one of that key agency has someone ably represented here, which is INEC, which I'm glad about. Now, other agencies are the security apparatus and the like, but the lead agency is INEC in that sense. And when you look at it carefully, you realize the fact that INEC has shown tremendous progress from what we had in 1999 to the 2004 elections, you know, and going forward and all that. What we've seen is the fact that there's a certain consistency, 2003, 2007, you know, election as it were. There's a certain consistency in the progress we've made with INEC. And the current INEC now has shown certain level of readiness and preparedness for this election. But you cannot rule out the policy environment, right? The political environment, which is a key part of that framework, which includes, for example, CBN, making policies that might necessarily get Nigerians, you know, in the wild and may disrupt what INEC has planned, right? Consciously. So those are key elements. However, with INEC also, I do not think that in terms of the readiness to harness the opportunities to communicate, right? There's so much work they put into this whole process that there's been top-notch. They've been top-notch in that sense. And by that, I simply mean, let me give instance of the Ebola crisis, right? Or the coronavirus crisis that we had. You see that there was a certain partnership between the National Center for Disease Control, NCDC, and other stakeholders. By stakeholders, I mean the media, I mean social media platforms, right? And one of the key elements in information, disinformation and misinformation has been that platform. We all know that a lot of Gen Zs are in TikTok, Snapchat, a lot of, you know, baby boomers, millennials are Facebookers, a lot of, let's say, across board, but most of baby boomers, millennials on LinkedIn, right? And then Twitter has that kind of democracy of the banter group who try to intellectualize both sense and nonsense, right? Now, you see that that group was, those platforms were utilized during the Ebola and Corona, you know, to pass out information from sources, right? And they had dedicated channels for that purpose. But with INEC, you know, until recently, after much advocacy, there had been no real partnership, you know, in terms of partnership with social media platforms and even media platforms to have direct information channel of so much work they are doing to the voters. And that, the result of that is what you have recently, where a lot of people storm the Lagos INEC office and say that their voters' cards are not available. And INEC is sincerely telling them that, look, you should have transferred your voters' card, not register for new voters' card. Because when you register for new voters' card, the process is that the old voters' card takes effect wherever you have registered earlier, and the new voters' card is nullified, right? Or the new registration is nullified. A lot of people didn't know that. That side could have been stemmed by partnership communication across stakeholders in a way that, you know, there are dedicated channels on Twitter, TikTok, and the likes that disseminate those kind of information to people directly from INEC as a source, not through third-party intermediaries. And so that's why I think there is a gap in that sense. But in progress, INEC is doing so. You know, there's so much to talk about on the question you've asked, but I just want to clear the bubble up with this line of argument or position. And then maybe I can talk about other things. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just before I move to Kemi, I also have one question I would like to get your thoughts on. Now, I want to come back a bit to the political actors now. Do you sense, I mean, when you look at their manifestos, do you sense any form of readiness for them? I know a few things have changed in the political process. Usually we would have two major players, but now that has changed. A lot has changed, but do you see any duplication in their manifestos as we have done in the last cycle of elections since 1999? Or do you sense that there's something we can actually grab when you look at their manifestos, all of them that are leading in this election. What do you have to say about that?
Okay, brilliant question you asked. I've been privileged to read the manifestos of the 4 leading candidates. I mean, the 76-page manifesto of Peter Obi, the 80-page manifesto of Tinubu, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I think the 115-page manifesto of Atiku, and that of Kwakwanso. Those were the 4 leading candidates, as it were, that have been privileged to read their manifestos. And the interesting thing that strikes me across board is that across board, I see a consistency of not addressing issues from a policy perspective, right? Now, there's a difference. That's the challenge. There's a deficit in terms of understanding policy. And we have a lot of people in leadership who come with the baggage of experience running businesses, experience whatever, doing what, but do not understand how to leverage those experiences and vision in a policy angle. Because look, when you talk about policy, you're talking about the vehicles of governance for achieving whatever vision you have, right? And those vehicles of governance includes the ministries, the departments, the agencies, whether at the federal and the state level. So you have situations where someone is telling you there'll be scholarship for girls in technologies, skills. That's Tinubu's manifesto, for example. And then Atiku is telling you that there is going to be a conscious effort at developing girls in technology skills. Now, you can see that, you can see those kind of languages. But then what machinery, what vehicle are you going to use to achieve that, right? So what I see consistently is that we are just evolving. Yes, we've evolved away from what we were before in terms of consciousness, but I don't see a consistent seriousness of a manifesto that is driven by evidence-based research. For example, we talked that, issues, for example, of, let's say, issues of, blockchain, for example.
Okay.
As important that may be, issues of how do you drive effectiveness in e-governance. Interesting. Effectiveness in e-governance through technology. How do you want to achieve that? Interestingly, Kwakwanso's manifestos, they mention transparency of e-governance or governance process. Tinubu's manifesto, interestingly, missed that out. Manifesto made a slight reference to leveraging technology to drive e-governance, but nothing more. Atiku's manifesto seemed to kind of understand the process and talks about leveraging technology stuff for, driving e-governance, and then software that would help drive efficiency across the ministries and departments and agencies of government in such a way that you can measure their efficiency of outputs. Well, that's commendable. That seems to talk to the issue. So you see that some are lacking in some things and some are better in some things, and that should not be the case in that sense. So I do not see that as much. But for now, right, integrity is the correspondence of words with action. So for voters out there, really what you should be weighing the manifesto against is the integrity of the candidates in delivering on their promises in past assignments that they've had. And also, look, let me tell you this truth. The biggest manifesto, painfully, you cannot justify it in a court of law, is chapter 2 of the Constitution. And I employ Nigerians to read chapter 2 of the Constitution. You see that the Constitution spells out the biggest manifesto that any political candidate that is serious can run with, whether at the federal or at the state level. So that is
what does that Constitution say? You want to share?
Yeah, what is it?
I said, what does that part of the Constitution say?
Oh, yes. So the chapter 2 of the Constitution talks about fundamental objectives and directive of state principles, right? And it talks about education, it talks about corruption, it talks about media, it talks about a lot of things that cuts across issues that can serve as a definite template for the foundation upon which the vision of any candidate can be built upon. It talks about in education, for example, free education, primary, secondary, tertiary education for Nigerians. This is the Constitution. So anybody coming to tell you otherwise is, saying balderdash. The challenge with that Constitution is that in the latter part of it, it says that you cannot institute an action to enforce it. which means it is not justiciable in courts of law. But you can institute an action as a court of public opinion through the fundamental C's, what I call conversation, consolidation, and confrontation. Because protest is a key part of the democracy, but it must not be exhausted until a last resort after conversation, opportunities for dialogue with governments and, petitions and advocacy has been exhausted. So that is it, yes. Over to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot for thanks a lot for that insight. That's really great. Also, I share your view a little on some of the manifestos, but I mean, what is most important for me as a young person is benchmarking that with what some of them have done in the past, and see how that stands out in what they are proposing to do. But I would like to move to Kemi now. Kemi Adefisaya, can you hear me clear, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. So, I see a few messages. Please, just in case your Zoom is having issues, we are streaming on the Global Shapers, Legal Shapers YouTube channel. Please, in case your Zoom, I'm talking to the attendees. In case your Zoom is having any issue, you can also join us via our Legal Shapers YouTube channel. You can watch us live from there too. Okay, so Kemi, I wanted to ask you now, slightly same question to Timi earlier. How are you feeling as a young person going into this election, and what area gives you confidence in the preparedness of the political actors? And lastly, do you see any form of inclusiveness in the whole preparation for this election, especially in any of the plans of the actors towards inclusiveness, especially in the area of gender?
All right, thank you so much. To answer your first question, I am feeling very excited as a young person going into the elections, because clearly we can see that there is an agitation. Can you hear me though?
Yes, I hear you.
All right, because clearly we can see that there's an agitation, especially with the young people wanting better, people wanting different, people wanting a leadership that can not just a leadership that not just promises to take us somewhere, but just like Timi rightly said, has laid down plans as to how they would get us there. And of course, some of that is what he has extrayed over his conversation. But to answer one of your questions as well that talked about, is this even possible, a shift in political order, experiencing a difference when we talk about the leadership and how politics can play out? I would like to say yes, it's very possible. And of course, when we go back and look at history, because history is actually a map that can help the modern day traveler to actually navigate their path, we can see similar occurrences in some African countries. And of course, the cases are slightly different, but when we take a look at the Arab Springs, for example, in Tunisia, in 2011, when we had young people back then saying, no, enough is enough. We can't take this anymore. We need people who are really concerned about their people. We need leaders who really have the heart of the people and are willing to do the work to take them, to a better place. And that exactly is what happened in Tunisia with the protest, with the riots, where we had a 26-year-old young fruit seller, a vendor, set himself ablaze as a sign of saying we can't take this anymore. And that continued to other Middle Eastern African countries, talking about Egypt as well. And we could see some of the changes. So I believe that coming back home to Nigeria here, there's a possibility. There's a possibility because the people have power. And I think we're now in that season where we're beginning to realize that, yes, we actually have this power. We can make a choice and our voices can be heard. Over time, the notion has been that, oh, your vote really doesn't count. The notion has been that just do your best, and who would win is still, the winner is already decided before the election happens. But with the with the things that have been put in place by the INEC, with the way people are beginning to talk about the elections even more and encouraging young people to participate, yes, it's very possible that we experience a shift. It might not just be the way we expect it, but the fact that it has even started, that consciousness has been laid in the mind of young people that better is possible. Holding on to that is such a big deal for me. And I think it's something that every young person should hold on to, regardless of what the state of things might be saying, regardless of what other persons might think as well. So in my opinion, yes, a political shift is possible when we look at the history books, and it starts with the people. It starts with you and I. Moving on to your next question, I don't know if you could recap that for me. I was
talking about inclusiveness, and I mean, especially in the area of gender inclusion. I mean, I don't see a lot of the players talking much about it. Does that give you any concern? Is it something you see? I mean, as a young person, do you, especially in the area of, I'm just going to focus on gender inclusion. I mean, over years, we've had issues around, I mean, women not playing active role. So as we talk about the shift in the political order, do you see a shift in that area too, or is there a concern for you want to share?
All right, so there is a bit of concern, taking a look at the major actors and of course, how it's not so inclusive for women, but my concerns are as well put to rest, because I think it's high time that we realize that we can't afford a unidirectional approach. And we've already seen lots of other organizations, women coming together to literally change the mindset, to demystify some of the notions that we've carried over time when it talks about gender participation, women coming into politics, what is possible and what's not possible. Of course, globally, Nigeria is ranked really low when we talk about female participation in politics generally. From the ministerial level and across other levels of governance. But that is gradually beginning to change, with more attention, not just coming from the government, but also private organizations, really taking the front stage and supporting women and letting women know that you also have the rights to be in these offices, in these positions. And yes, so I think as much as we can do better, especially with the actors and their manifestos. I read on education, I read on economy and their philosophies, and I really didn't see so much as regards gender inclusion. But like I said, my fears are also put to rest, because in the background, a lot of work is also being done by lots of private organizations. And that's my standpoint. I believe as much as the government has a role to play, the private sector has a greater role to play in making sure that we contribute to socioeconomic development. Over time, we've relied on the government, and yes, policies are important. Yes, the right leadership is important. But in the case that we do not see it forthcoming in areas that we would like to see it happen, what do we do? Do we sit and wait? I do not think so. I think we can put our best foot forward, do our best. And while we have people like Timi and other policymakers also championing, at the front row, saying, let's have these policies in place, let's make it happen. We also begin to educate people in the grassroots. So yes, that's my standpoint.
So I guess we can all agree a shift is actually happening away from the old order as we used to see things, but we just need to have like an X-ray to be sure that what is happening is actually what we envisage, and be sure that we are all excited on where we are going with the shift that is happening. Thanks a lot, Kemi. I want to bring our INEC rep. Please, let's feel free to turn on our videos. My own video is not on because for some reason my camera won't come up for some reason. But please, I encourage everybody, especially our speakers, to please turn on your cameras so that our attendees can see you as you share your thoughts. So please forgive my own for not coming. I don't want to battle with it so that we don't waste so much time on it. All right. So Mrs. Fortune is head of gender for INEC Lagos. You can hear me, Ma Claire? You're muted, Ma, please.
Me on mute. All right.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. We see you. We see you. Thank you for finding time to join us. And as you have been listening, you can feel. I mean, we want to commend INEC for all the efforts thus far. Though there are a few areas we wish, like Timmy highlighted, INEC could have done better differently. But I'm loving the fact that INEC is taking lessons from each election cycle. And we see a lot of improvement from 2019 to 2023. But just to get your thoughts on it, how would you say INEC is prepared for this election? Do you? I mean, between the range of 1 to 10, how is INEC prepared for this election coming up later this month?
Thank you, Mr. Wisdom. I can confidently say that INEC is doing all we can to make sure that this election, 2023 election, comes up very well. You know, just like you said, the electoral process is a process, and every process keeps growing and keeps developing. You know, it's not the way we used to do things way back 2011, 2015. There are a lot of things that have changed, you know, in the electoral process, and we keep developing and keep working to make sure that everything comes out well. And at the end of the day, almost everybody gets satisfied. And at the end of the day, and we are committed to having free, fair, and credible election in Nigeria. You know, presently we are working so hard. Like today, we're in the field working, doing what we call a mock election, kind of trying to test our vast machine. We are trying that to speak to about 6 local governments from the 3 senatorial districts here in Lagos, you know, trying to ensure that everything works out fine on the election day. Whatever we do today will also help us to find out where there's going to be issues, and we'll be able to take care of it before the election day proper. So we are doing everything. Ongoing is also the collection of a permanent voters card. Up till now, we are still giving. We are not distributing, because if it's by distribution, you just be giving it out. Somebody can even collect for somebody, but we're not giving. Everybody go there, pick your card, so that if there's any issue, you won't say you sent Mr. A to pick your card
to pick it,
your card to somebody without your permission and all that. Even we don't even give husbands to give to their wives. You pick your own, you tell your wife to come and pick her card, you know. So that's how it is. Everything possible so that people don't start complaining about being disenfranchised on the election. Presently, we have about 7.6 million registered voters in Lagos. As at 2nd of this February, the total number of PVC that have been collected is about 6.6 million. So you can see that we are pushing it. We are doing everything we can, working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Sunday. So if you say your work didn't allow you to do that Monday to Friday, you'll be able to pick Saturday and Sunday. We are moving. People are channeling their complaints. Those that didn't see their card, they did transfer one thing or the other with mission corrections. They file in their incidents, we forward it to Abuja. Cards are even last week Sunday, other batches of all these complaints, and people are getting their cards. At least I have a lot of people that are close to me that complained. I told them, go and an incident case on your map. They did, and by this week they are sending me messages. Madam, thank you. We've been able to collect our card. They printed our card finally. The one they want, like she just won a jackpot that they printed our card. So all those things make me excited. We are working so hard to make sure that everybody votes on the many that wants to vote.
Thanks a lot for that. I just wanted to ask before I go into my questions. People that registered before that still have their voters card, that didn't register again this last time, but they still have their voters card. Any issue with them voting on that day? I mean, for those people that probably registered in 2011 that still have their cards, I'm asking because of the introduction of the BVAS system. Would that affect them voting on that day?
Every card that is registered from 2010, 2011 till date is still very valid, and you can still use it to vote on the election day.
Okay, all right, great. Nice to have that confirmation. Now, why we brought INEC into the conversation too is because a shift has happened, and the introduction of the BVAS system is a massive shift. But I would like you to use the next 2 minutes to sort of break down how the BVAS system works. because if you listen to Timmy and Kemi sharing their thoughts on the election and the shift we're experiencing in the political space, I like to say the Beavers will be a very major actor to achieve this shift we're looking at as young people. But can you sort of explain how, break it down, how the Beavers works for those probably who want to learn for the first time?
Okay, the Beavers is an acronym. It's a bimodal voter accreditation system. It's a device that we are going to use. In fact, during registration, we used it. It's given a different name. Now we are going to use it for election. It's going to have a different name. That's Beavers. And when we are going to do transmission, we baptize it and give it another name, IREV. That's INEC results. If you import it, you use it to transmit INEC results. So it's performing 3 different functions. But let's restrict ourselves now to Beavers. That's a bimodal voter accreditation system. What this does is that on the election day, with or without internet, you don't need to connect. You use it to do what? Do accreditation, to authenticate that say this person is carrying INEC card and this person is registered in this particular polling unit to vote on the election day. And how does it do this accreditation? It captures your fingerprint and your facial and your face. So if you say maybe by the nature of the work you're doing, it's not able to capture your fingerprint, definitely it will capture your face. So whichever way, whether by fingerprint or by face, you will be authenticated to vote, to authenticate you, and then you'll be able to cast your vote on the election day. So it's as simple as that.
Okay, so another issue many have raised with the Beavers is the issue of network. There are many areas, I can tell you, even in my own local government in Rivers State, there are a few places you will go, and I believe you don't have network. And I know the National Assembly had raised this earlier when they tried to channel INEC to the LCC to get approval to come back, which was heavily fought, by the public also and many members of the House. So we'll still have that issue of transmission or transmitting in areas that are not covered. So how does the Beavers work, especially in the areas where network coverage might be an issue in Nigeria?
All right, like I said before, if we are listening very well to me, I said the Beavers during voting and accreditation, it doesn't need network to work. It's only when you are done and you want to transmit results that you activate your internet. And this Beavers is a current machine that works with 4G, So that may be a little hitches they may have in some areas where their networks are not very strong. But in most cases, in most places where we have the networks working very well, definitely the transmission will be as easy. And everybody can monitor from their home. You don't even need to get to the voting point to monitor the transmission of the result. You can do that in the comfort of your home by logging onto our site, where but before you can log into the INEC viewing portal, you have to have a valid email address, because that's the only access you can use to be able to access viewing the results as they are uploading it on our INEC viewing portal.
Okay, so after they finish, they will have to now upload it onto the INEC viewing portal using the paper. So in those,
they will be needing internet or network to do that. But during accreditation and voting, the machine works without internet. So you can't say maybe there's no internet, that's why they tell you cannot be accredited or vote. No.
Okay. All right. Just to highlight,
before you can access that portal, the INEC result viewing portal, you must have a valid email address. That's what will help you to gain access into this portal on the election day to view the results they are uploading on the portal.
Okay. No, I don't know if you are aware of this Osun issue with overvoting. that happened in the Oshu matter that is now in court and all of that. Just wanted to get your thoughts on overvoting with the beavers. Is that even possible? And was it the network issue or something? I don't know. Just talking about overvoting generally, so I don't talk on that particular topic.
Okay, on the issue of Osun State, I cannot say anything about that because we are here in Lagos. We are talking about Lagos situations, so I'm not allowed to talk about anything that happens outside my jurisdiction, in Osun or anywhere. So I can't talk about that, but I can assure you that on the election day, before the commencement of accreditation, the presiding officer at the polling unit is expected to show everybody, as they open the beavers machine, they show it to everybody, reading 000 shows that nothing has been recorded on the beavers machine before they say. If they don't do that, people around there should question the presiding officer. That's the very first thing. After talking and addressing people, and they want to open poll, the first thing they will do is to open the beavers machine, show people that, look at this, is on 00 record, nothing, no vote has been recorded on this device before they start their accreditation for the day.
Oh, beautiful. I have a question for you now. Someone is asking, how soon after and how often will the portal be updated? That's the portal you mentioned where the beavers is uploading the results, the INEC portal. So how soon after will that?
Because this portal will start work. You can even check it now. You can even test it now. If you have a valid email address, you can access. You can go to INEC result viewing portal with your email and check what is there for yourself, even before the election day.
What's the address? INEC viewing portal. Is that the address?
INEC result viewing portal. INEC result viewing portal. But you must have a valid email address.
Okay. All right. We'll I'm sure everybody already gone there to look it up. Okay, guys, it's important to ask questions now. It's almost very difficult to get the INEC people because they are very busy now. So in case you have any questions on INEC, go on,
Mr. Wisdom, somebody said something. I can't pick the name of the person right now. Said something that we are not doing much on the social media.
Yes.
Honestly, we are doing a whole lot because my department is in charge of handling publicity, media, voter education, and whatever information you can ever think of. We have our INEC, we have Instagram handle, we have Twitter handle, we are on Facebook. We have a dedicated phone line that you can call from morning till evening for any inquiry, for any question, and that phone, they answer it in front of me on daily basis. So we have them for Instagram is INEC Lagos, for Twitter at INEC Lagos, for Facebook is INEC Lagos HQ, the HQ for headquarters. And then I can call dedicated phone line, you can call, but don't be calling it in the night during office hours, around 6 p.m. in the evening, because the person handling it, she has a family, of course. When work closes in the evening, she has a right to rest. Not easy talking from morning till evening. Night. One individual. It's not always easy. This indicator phone line is 081 454 194 83. I take it again. 081 45 41 94 83. Call it and ask whatever questions or clarifications you want at any time. Somebody will always be there to talk to you. And like our social media, let me repeat them again. Instagram is INEC Lagos. Twitter is at INEC Lagos. And then Facebook is INEC Lagos HQ. HQ, that's for headquarters. HQ. That's our Facebook. So these are the social media handles. And we are there every minute talking to people, answering questions. So go there and somebody will always respond.
All right, thank you so much. We are already out of time. Before I let you go, just wanted to ask you, someone is also asking, you've met the areas where network issues, where they will have network issues, how will transmission be done, since it cannot be done instantly, maybe after voting because of the network issue? How would it?
If it's not done at the polling unit, then by the time they get to the collation center, because of course they will try to see that wherever the collation centers, the registration area collation centers that controls the polling unit in each registration area. Definitely by the time they get there to hand over the results to the collation officer, definitely there will be network for them to upload.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mrs. Fortune. She's head of gender unit.
Sorry, one more thing before I go. I always encourage people, if you have the right to vote, you have the right to monitor the compilation of the result of your voting. Sometimes it's not always good for you to vote and hurry home. You can hang around, you don't need to make trouble. Hang around the polling units, you have the right to stay there and monitor everything, because we are doing both electronics collation and manual collation. So if you miss out in the electronics collation, you'll be able to stay back and monitor the manual collation and be able to get the results before you leave the polling unit.
All right. Thank you so much. That is Mrs. Fortune Mbamalo, head of gender unit, INEC Lagos. In case you have any questions for her, you can drop in the question box or in the chat box for her. But just before we round up this panel session, I would like to now go back to Timmy. Timmy, if you want to share with us, I mean, do you have any? Are you confident? Lastly, with some of the preparations so far, if you want to share any thoughts on that, and most especially, what has given young people a lot of concern again is the area of one. She has clarified though transmission, how that will work, and again the issue of overvoting. She didn't want to speak much on that, but Timmy, you want to hear me? If you want to, any thoughts, just to get your final thoughts on this conversation on the shift, the political revolution. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you so much, madam, for taking our time to do this. I think it'd be quite useful. Well, on the issue of the overvoting, the challenge is this, which is something we never anticipated in the Electoral Act, which has, everything has its good and bad sides, right? So the Electoral Act, to a large extent, specified. I think when it talks about the overvoting, I think section 52, thereabout or so, talks about the fact that where there is a situation of overvoting, there seems to be a background noise. I don't know where that is coming from. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You can go on.
There's a background noise from somewhere. Okay. Okay, good. When there's a situation of overvoting, right, what then happens is that the electoral officer in charge of that particular has capacity to nullify that result because of overvoting. So the challenge is this: it's also a two-way sword, which means somebody else may have been perpetuated overvoting through INEC officials, and then when that happens, the other person who had not been part of that action will be punished for that action, right? Another candidate or other voters, so that's one challenge. Another challenge, that's one challenge, but it has its good side, right? To forestall tendencies for overvoting and rigging of any sorts. And the fact that people can know that, look, politicians can know that indeed they cannot benefit from actions of manipulations or corruptions in the electoral process. Another thing is also in terms of violence, right? Where there is violence in a polling unit, right? There's a capacity based on the Electoral Act for the INEC official in charge to cancel that polling unit. But the challenge now lies with when INEC declares results and says, look, this is not considered overvoting. And then the courts now come and say something else and say, look, there was a situation of overvoting. However, that is still something that in the next few months, maybe post-election, right, 2, 3, 4 months, we'll be able to know what the Court of Appeal or Supreme Court says about the situation. So it is still pending, still in court. So we cannot use that as a basis for concluding, which is why it is safe that she never said anything about it, right? Because it's still in courts, right? So that's the situation as it were. So there's no conclusion on that thought process, but that keeps us thinking, right? That what is the state of integrity of INEC officials who will be manning these polling units in terms of ensuring that a few bad eggs do not compromise the hard work of the many good officials like Madam, who are doing tireless work and efforts before election, during election, and post-elections. That is one key thing. Second key thing is, the fact that what is the situation? Because there are places where internet will be a problem. That is a given.
Yeah.
When it comes to Nigeria, I don't know why project management is not a key part of our framing. Look at the pros, the cons, the possibilities, the back and forth. And so, for example, as I'm speaking with you on this platform, I have 2 internet on standby. That's still project management, right? In case one fails, I can switch on to the other one.
That's true.
The logic there is the fact that the internet situation will become a problem in very core rural and semi-rural areas, even in urban areas. Even in Lagos. Okay, I didn't want to come there. I didn't want to come there. But
unless they are using SpaceX.
So now Starlink, I think Starlink has come to Nigeria.
Yes.
Right? What is the possibility of finding possibilities of partnerships with Starlink to cater for a backup internet stuff across board? Because I know Starlink is not based on whether it's rural or urban area. As long as
you can use in the most interior villages.
You can use it in interior villages anywhere, as long as the sky covers you. And so that is also a possibility for a backup. And I'm sure that might be something that Starlink might be willing to, integrate in, considering that they are just in Nigeria, and they want to also prove the capacity for them to deliver on internet, right? So that can be a backup.
Okay.
I'm not saying that, that can be a backup. And so those are some of the core challenges, because these things will definitely the integrity of INEC officials.
Yeah.
And secondly, in terms of yes, if they are, yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Timmy. Just to round up, Kemi, you want to get your final thoughts on this particular conversation? You've already said you are excited as a young person going into the election. But with what has been shared by INEC, any final thoughts in preparation for the election?
Thank you so much, Wisdom. It's been a really insightful session, and to Timmy as well, and to Mrs. Fortune. Like I said earlier, yes, very excited, and of course the reassurance from what Mrs. Fortune already shared with us. The final thing I would like to say is that young people, it's just important that we guard our gates, talking about the kind of information that we let seep into our subconscious. Because of course, when we're able to do that, we have higher chances of just reinforcing our convictions. And with all of the support that the young people are getting, with, of course, the kind of push that we're given and the kind of involvement that we see many young people taking with these elections, it's very clear that, like I said earlier, a shift is possible. It might not be how we expect it to be, but of course, if we can reinforce those convictions and play our part and trust in other parties and key players to also do the same, we'll see those changes happen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I mean, I enjoyed that conversation, and with Timmy's passion, I'm sure we'll not go today, but I always enjoy to hear his thoughts on a lot of conversation. And Kemi, thanks a lot too for sharing your thoughts. We can't have enough of this topic. It's an unending one, but because of time, we really need to move forward to other conversation. But thank you, Mrs. Fortune, Head of Gender Unit, INEC Lagos, and we have your contact. I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you when we get those many consents from our community, just in case anyone has anything to reach out to INEC for. INEC has always been very close to the community, and they've never failed to support anytime we reach out to them. And just to say, during the build-up of the PVC drive last year, Global Shapers in partnership with Youth for Nigeria and also We Vote we're across different campuses across Lagos, just to convince a lot of young people to get their PVC and to prepare to vote. And I mean, I'm happy, or we are happy to share that drive we did encourage at least 5,000 young people to register to get their PVC. And so in the larger number shared by INEC on the number of people young people that have registered to vote, we are happy that we also contributed to that pool of numbers just to convince. The reason why we're having this conversation to be sure that we get these young people ready to vote. So thank you once again, Timmy, Kemi, and unavoidably Bolahan, who is with me on WhatsApp and is very unhappy he was unable to join in due to technical issues. And Mrs. Fortune from INEC, thank you so much. But we have to wrap this up now so that we'll quickly move to the next conversation. Thank you once again, and I will be handing over to my other good friend Vanessa to take up from this point for the next conversation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Wisdom. I need to really run. Thank you so much for having me on this program. We really appreciate the good work that you people are doing together.
Thank you so much.
It's not just only about INEC. Everybody, all hands on deck to encourage people to pick up their permanent voters cards so that together we will do the and our country will get better. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for finding the time to join with your busy schedule. Thank you so much. Thank you. And our warm regards to the REC of Lagos. I mean, he acknowledged and he sent you to be here to speak with us. Thank you so much. We will find time to come see him formally to also sit and appreciate him. Thank you so much, man.
All right. Thank you. Take care and have a wonderful deliberation. Bye.
Bye. All right. Vanessa, over to you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Wisdom. And thank you, all our attendees. Thank you, our panelists. Thank you, Mrs. Fortune. I can imagine the amount of work that has gone into what they're currently trying to achieve. And we're part of that, as we all know. We have all collectively been trying to get young people to register. We are an implementing partner for Yaga Africa, and we're happy to have Yetunde here from Yaga Africa, who has done great work in this space. We're currently trying to get people to collect their PVC. So it's a process and we're all joining hands to make that happen. We also welcome Renew Odwala as well, who is a youth activist, as we all know, founder of Connect Hub. That's one of our panelists here alongside Yetunde Bakari. So without much ado, I'll just swing into this session. The topic is youth's role in national transformation. And just to provide some context, I would just start by talking about how the youth population, we all know how Nigeria is generally a young country. 18 is the median age of our population. And we have over 60% of the population under the age of 35. So ordinarily, this is actually an asset. Many countries around the world have used this to build great economies, introduce a lot of creativity and innovation into their development. Nigeria, unfortunately, seems to be yet to activate its youth population in terms of governance, democracy, and leadership. And we think that this is key to driving long-term growth and sustainability. So we do agree with the much touted belief that the future of Nigeria is synonymous to the future of the youth. But we're also very curious as to how exactly this will take shape and how this can be done to secure a future of prosperity and better opportunities. So this is the context of our conversation this morning. I believe it's still morning. Yes, it is. And we have some questions for our panelists. So I think I'll start with Renew. If you are here, welcome, Renew. I would like to pose the question to you. The question being, do you think Nigeria is fully leveraging its power, the power of its youth rather, to ramp up nation building now and in the future? So what are the things that we can do? What are the strategies that we can implement? Of course, CSOs like ours and of course yours have been very active in trying to amplify the youth voices using online and offline methods to make this happen. But what are the things that we can do that possibly we haven't leveraged properly to actualize or to leverage the power of the youth in nation building?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for organizing this platform. I hope I can hear me. Well, do I think that this country is fully leveraging the power of its youth? No, I don't think so, because young people are the greatest assets that any nation can have. Not only are we future leaders, we are also the greatest investment of any country, any country in the world actually, the future of any country in the world is actually tied to its young people. If you throw away the young people, then you've thrown away the country. And that's why they're saying that the youth of today are the leaders of the children of today are the leaders of tomorrow, because without young people, there can be no future for any nation at all. And if you now look at the country that we have today, and directly to the question that you asked, people are ramping up, if you are fully leveraging the potential that we have as youth, are we fully leveraging the future of this country? I would say no, because in any youth of any nation, you find the strength of that nation. Like I said, you find the future of that nation, you find the development of that nation, you even find the security of that nation. If you don't secure the youth, then that nation cannot be secured. I think that was the late Nnamdi Azikiwe who said that if you want to know the future of any nation, take a look at what the youth of that nation are doing presently. Let us take a look at what the youth of this nation are doing currently. Is it geared towards the future of Nigeria? Is it geared towards the betterment of this nation? And then let us now take a look at nation building, for example. Nation building has so many definitions. So many people have their own definitions, but then for me, I believe that it is that process where a society begins to integrate their own people. They begin to form a common identity with themselves in order to be able to ensure that there is unity. The purpose of any nation building in any nation is to build unity, is to achieve national integration, and you have to assume that somebody is doing something. So at the young people of today that we have, when we come to Nigeria, they doing something when it comes to national unity, when it comes to societal integration in our country. And I think that it's not as if we've not always done things. Young people in this nation have always played prominent roles. But then I think the decline began recently. When you look at Nnamdi Azikiwe, who I quoted recently, at 33, was already fighting for against the colonialists that were in this country. At age 30, the late Anthony Enaoro, also was the one who initiated the motion for the Nigerian independence. At 24, you have someone who is already a foreign minister, I think Matthew Imbu. At 32, you have General Yakubu, who was already head of state. At 39, even the president of the first republic that we had, the fourth republic, Olusegun Obasanjo was already head of state, at the age of 34. So you can see that young people in Nigeria have always played a prominent role. But then the decline began recently. And why did they play prominent role then? It was because there was at least a bit of functional government framework in the colonial era and in the past colonial era. You could see the education that those people had then. They were going to school. There were so many opportunities, even in the face of the military junta, in the face of in the face of the civil war, a lot of coups here and there. There were still opportunities for socioeconomic development. But then today, what do you see in Nigeria? You see a frustrated and hungry youth. We are battling with all sorts: police brutality, unemployment, poverty, illiteracy, an epileptic educational system, where young people are just going to school to graduate. And then you see the recent notion where they say, oh, school na scam. Because then the only thing that young people today in Nigeria are doing is just, let me go to school and graduate. And that's why they can be able to reiterate that notion by saying that school is a scam. So there's no conducive context for Nigeria to be able to leverage on the power of its youth. And there's a lot of absence, like I said, the indices that I said earlier of building a strong and empowered youth population. So if we don't have that empowered youth population, how can then will the country be able to build? What did you say? What was the question again? How can then the country be able to develop or leverage on the power that it had? Was it Kofi Annan that said that a society that cuts itself off from its youth, has killed itself, and that society will definitely bleed to death. If you ask you and I today, is Nigeria not bleeding already to death? There are no safe spaces for young people to thrive, not to now talk of them building the nation. We are busy fighting for our lives, and that's the point I would like to make. The young Nigerians today are busy fighting for their lives. And then we cannot now start to talk of them leveraging on the power of the youth, because the youth have no power. in the first place. I can begin to go into how, even when it comes to developing young people in political positions, that Nigeria ruling class has failed. So today, in today's Nigeria, the power of young people in nation building has not been developed. It's undervalued. In some cases, it's even absent. So before we can now begin to say Nigeria has to leverage on this, I can go on to what the roles of the youth are supposed to be in this nation development, how they're supposed to build these roles and all of that. But then we've not even built the young people in the first place. So if young people do not participate or are not allowed to participate in civil society, just like you asked, in CSOs, in these developmental roles, in civic participation, it will affect their ability to become responsible leaders in the future. And so somebody else says, build the youth and build the nation. Destroy the youth, destroy the nation. So there are no safe spaces. There are no ample opportunities for those youth to become empowered to the extent that the nation can then begin to leverage on those youths. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. But just as a follow-up, so where does the responsibility lie? We do agree that youths are struggling. We can't expect people that are struggling to get jobs to survive and be productive members of society to, begin to aspire for higher, nationhood and all that. So what do we now say? What do we do in terms of, is it the government? Is it a question of a generational shift where there's just not that absence of civic responsibility? What do you think that as youths, we're talking as youths as well, what can we do differently given the context, given the situation that we find ourselves in?
Well, I think that having talked about the multiple barriers that we're facing, like I said, the barriers to poverty, barriers to educational barriers, discrimination barriers, I still think that the responsibility lies on the people that we vote into power, on the government. Because for me, I think that young people are already doing enough. Ever since when we talk about youth political movement in Africa, the Arab Awakening, the Occupy Nigeria protest, the NSAS protest that even happened recently, young people have remained politically active. You may not realize it. You may say, oh, they have chosen to stay out of politics. But I believe that the participation in this mass movement can also be referred to as participation. They're just choosing to engage in participatory politics rather than go through the traditional mediums of politics that have always failed them. So they've always remained active, but then they are disillusioned with the political leadership and political institutions that we have and are often excluded from policy and development. I said when I was on an interview one day, I said that often the engagement of young people when it comes to Africa, when it comes to even Nigeria, is often tokenistic. They are doing it in such a way that they will see that, oh, let them think that we're engaging them. Meanwhile, they're not really engaging them. Let us so that they will say we would not exclude young people. Just bring them, put them in this position, put them in that position. Those positions are not actually effective. Like I said, they're just tokenistic. So if we are talking about who the responsibility lies on, the responsibility would lie on the government. One, it also lies on some contexts. Just like I said earlier, it lies on the political context, it lies on the socioeconomic context, it lies on the cultural context. And that's where we can begin to participate. The participation of, say, youth in Ghana is different from the one that we have in Nigeria today. The participation of youth in Kenya is different from I was observing Kenyan election, but I was an international observer in that election. And you could see that young people who were very, very much active in their political system, they may not be showing up in the voting aspect, but you will see that people that they voted into power, there was at least a 21-year-old, a 22-year-old, a 24-year-old, that were already becoming MCAs, they were already becoming councillors, they were already becoming members of the state parliament and all of that. So there are laws that have been created to enable that, to ensure that these young people if you have people like 19, 20 years old that were contesting in those elections. So that context, and they have laws. When I asked, there were laws already that ensure that young people are able to participate. In fact, they have this reserved roles even for women in their parliaments, in their counties and all of that. So the opportunities for them to thrive in Kenya. It's different from the opportunities we have in Nigeria to try. When you have an 18-year-old contesting in Nigeria, I don't even know the kind of reaction that you get from the society. Our laws even get towards ensuring that these young people can participate. Even in Nigeria alone, people under the age of 35 are rarely found in formal political leadership positions. You know, even when we look at the fact that our population has 60% young people, from ages, let's say ages 15 to 35, you know. So there's no adequate representation of young people in formal political positions when we look at our Senate, our National Assembly, and all of that. So there's a lot of difficult positions. But then what I wanted to say when you come to responsibilities is that young people are already there. Like I talked about the mass movement, I talked about the protest, I talked about other forms of political participation that is not the traditional mediums which young people are disinterested in already. So young people are already there. All they need is support for their participation in inclusive political processes, support for them in individual capacity, a focus on young women, because I mean, you can barely find them in our political position, and they're the ones leading mass movements. They're the ones leading, you know, other sort of community organizing in our society today. Go to any CSOs. This is not to marginalize or disenfranchise young men, you know. But then go to our CSOs, you find that women are the ones leading many of these processes when it comes to nation building. So also the promotion of an enabling environment. You know, I talked about the government process in the first place, but then also there needs to be positive promotion of young people's skills and capacities. The media also has a role to play in this. A lot more than half of the time when you see young people who are contesting or who are going into political position, there is often this look which media even tends to view them, you know, which translates on the general population, like, what are you doing here in the first place? You know, the engagement is often a sort of comedy engagement. And this can be related to the NSAS process, you know, when we started and then the media started doing a lot of interviews. The first thing they started to ask was that, I don't understand how I can describe the questions, but then especially for females who are engaging in the protest, it was like, you people just started, you know, so how are young women engaging in this protest? It was a sort of awe and shock reaction. Like young people,
I think the word is condescending.
Exactly, that young women are engaging in a protest. And my reply to them is that young women have always engaged in protest. In fact, young Nigerians have always engaged in protest. This is not the first time. We can go back in history to the About Women protests, to the protests that Funmilayo and some Kuti held, and all of that. These people have always been there. You did not choose to see them. So why is this some sort of awe or shock now that young women are engaging in protest, that young people are engaging in protest? So I think the media also has a role to play in that. Also, like I said, it's important that we invest, not just CSOs, not just government, but other people, other organizations who are ready to see young people in the front line of leadership, that we invest in their ability to contribute to their society today. I saw a video recently about how they were dragging young people for not even knowing the names of their ministers, for not even knowing the names of their deputy governors, for not even knowing the names of their senators and all of that. So you have two sides to it. The first side is, well, is the society itself, is it actively encouraging these people to want to get to know more? Or is it always, like we talked about the issues earlier, dragging them back and saying, Omo, don't even try to involve yourself in this country. What you should do is to get some money and jackpot. The other side, and that's one end. The other end is that, are there active processes or engagement in order to be able to ensure that these young people are interested in coming to take over the leadership position? We have always said right from the start that the children of today are the leaders of tomorrow. The young people of today are the leaders of tomorrow. But then young people have now become the youths. You know, those children have now become the youths now. That they're supposed to now become the leaders, right? The leaders of yesterday are still coming back, you know, to say, no, we still want to be leaders of tomorrow. When exactly will the youth of today now be leaders of tomorrow? So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And just to add on to what you said about opening up the space to younger people, I'd like to bring in Yetunde Bakare now. Of course, her organization, Yaga, is credited with pushing legislation in that direction, the Not Too Young to Run bill, which has thankfully been passed. And of course, they have other initiatives like the Run to Win initiative, trying to provide that support that you mentioned to younger people that are contesting elections. We know it's not just about bringing down the age, there's also some type of technical support, as well as we must admit there's a war chest that a politician or anybody contesting, a candidate, must have to prosecute an election. So I'd like to hear from Yetunde now. And I must apologize to the attendees. I'm having technical issues. Zoom doesn't want us to be great, so my video is having an issue. But I would like, if Yetunde can be kind enough to turn on her video as well, so that she can give us her views on that issue about youth participation and what can be done to open up that space further, apart from what has already been done. And if I can also add in, what can a young person do to improve governance and enhance Nigeria's democracy structures? Please, Yetunde, welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Good, I think it's still morning. Yes, it's still morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. So just piggyback on what Renew said about supporting young people who are already in elective office. That's something that Yaga Africa is doing. And to just give a bit of context about the Not Too Young to Run legislation that reduced the age for the eligibility for contesting for some elective office in Nigeria, the House of Assembly, House of Representatives, and the Office of the Senate. And after that, we saw an increase in the number of young candidates who were contesting for elective office in Nigeria. 23% contested for National Assembly election and 41.8% contested for the National Assembly. And of course, as a result of that, at the end of the elections, we saw an increase in the percentage of young people who are in the House of Representatives under the age of 35, which increased from 0.8% to 3.6%, and in the State Houses of Assembly, which are the legislature in the different states, also rose from 6% to 9% after the 2019 election. And we are seeing that same trend in the increase of young people who are contesting for office in the 2023 election. Out of the over 15,000 candidates who are contesting for the 2023 election, 4,398 are young candidates. And out of that, 1,899 are under 35 years old, who are the direct beneficiaries of the Not Too Young to Run amendments. Now, contesting for office is one thing, and performing excellently when you're in office is another. Why the Not Too Young to Run legislation opened up the space for people to run. It is how do they emerge as winners of their election, which is one thing that Yaga is heavily investing in. We just concluded a conference, a Ready to Run conference, for young people who are contesting for legislative seats across the country. So we had a convening for 150 candidates, to just prepare them for what is ahead of them. What are their roles and responsibilities? What's this burden of leadership as young people? Because as young people, there's already that burden, one for your age, and the second because you don't have a vault of money somewhere. You're contesting against the political powers who have been in office for the very longest. And to also begin to think about what other means can these young candidates effectively mobilize funds for their election. Yes. Now, what can we do, which is a very, very big question. I think one is, how are we even profiling those who are in elective office currently? What do we know about them? How have they even performed? How many bills have they sponsored? How many motions have they supported? What is the quality of representation? How are their constituents even able to engage with them? And the other point is on the turnout. We know that the turnout since 2023 2023 seemed to be where we had the highest turnout, which was at 69%. And it continued to decline from 54% to 44% in 2015 and 35% in the 2019 election. And as young people, if it constitutes a huge block of the voting demography, we are not coming out to vote. We're not voting young people into elective office because it is imperative to believe that youth have a better perspective of the problems that affect them and are able to profess solutions to address them. This is why it's important to integrate young people into the structure, right? But we're not coming out to vote on election day. We're not voting our demography into political power. Even though power is not given a la carte, we have to be able to participate to take that power. And we have to be able to mobilize and support these young people who have the competence, the character, the capacity for elective office. And we even identified them. And we're so fixated on what happens at the center. We are forgetting that we have members in the State House Assembly. We have members in the National Assembly, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. And these people are responsible for making policies that can shape our lives. A legislation by the National Assembly can put all our lives on hold. A lawmaker can just wake up one morning and decide to draft a law that stops us from leaving our houses, that stops us from accessing healthcare. So it's very, very important that we pay very close attention to those who are contesting for the legislative offices.
Thank you for that, Yetunde. So just as a follow-on, perhaps there's some young people that may not want to put themselves forward as these political actors, apart from lacking possibly the resources, maybe they simply just don't have that charisma that they feel can win an election. They possibly lack some ideas as well. What other ways beyond politics can a young person in Nigeria contribute to national transformation? What can we do? What can we tell them to encourage them to participate in whatever capacity they can?
We all can run for elective office. We need to admit that. The number of offices to occupy are very limited. You can't take everyone. But what we can do as young people, one is to hold our elective leaders accountable, right? Do we have this dialogue with those who are in elective office? One thing that we encourage the young lawmakers that we work with in the National Assembly is encourage them to go back to their constituents and speak to those that they are representing. Let them understand what you're doing with the mandate that's been given to them. As young people, we also need to begin to ask very critical questions of the leaders that we are electing. What bills have you passed? What motions have you moved? How are you doing in the oversight committee that you are in the constituents? And there's also this very low understanding of what the roles and responsibilities of a lawmaker is. There's always that confusion between what the executive is supposed to be doing and what the legislator is supposed to do. And they receive things like, they are supposed to fix the road within their constituency. They're supposed to build hospitals. They are supposed to, erect police stations and all of that. But that's the core responsibility of the executive and not the roles of the legislator. The legislator has three key mandates, which is lawmaking, oversight, and representation. So as young people, do we even have that understanding? How are we able to also engage these lawmakers? Right? How are we also engaging in community organizing within our community? How are we organizing others to begin to drive that change within the community? The third also is how are we investing in the next generation of leaders? I mean, we have those who are turning 18 every year, and they would be those who would, be first-time voters. We need to imbibe that culture very early in them and ensure that they also begin to understand what politics is, why they need to participate.
Yes.
And for those of us who are older and we're gradually leaving the youth age, is how we build the next generation. What are we doing differently?
Yes, paying it forward.
Yeah, how are we using the power that we have to even mobilize other young people to gather support for young people who are running for office? But for some young people, all they need, for young candidates, sometimes what they need is just that encouragement from fellow young people like them, that you see them, you recognize them, and that you're supporting them and rooting for them.
Yes, that's very, very important. And our organization, of course, we're a youth-led organization, and we're lucky to have worked with so many of we're very collaborative in our approach, and we do recognize that it's a lot of work to get young people to enter into this space, not just as politicians or to activate them to enter leadership, but also to become youth mobilizers, to join political parties. Politics is not just for evil old men. You do have to begin to become civically engaged, and also, like you just said, to hold your leaders accountable. There are mechanisms in place that a lot of Nigerians don't know about. There's also something like the recall process, constitutionally provided for, where you can, start to begin to hold these people by their jugular and demand, results from legislators. So those are things that we're obviously trying to educate and mobilize young people to begin to think about. I'll just like to bring Renu in now, and I'll come back to you, Yetunde. Renu, please, I'd like to ask you a question, and I think I'll ask you the same question that I just asked Yetunde about beyond politics. What are the different ways that a young person in Nigeria can contribute? She has given a perspective, of what Yaga has been able to do, and they're doing great work in that regard. But what are the other ways in the corporate space, in education, in other contexts other than politics? What can young people begin to do to bring about that transformation? Hello, Renu, are you still there?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Welcome back.
So thank you very much. I think that the former speakers, she has done a lot of justice to that question. Actually, what can young people in Nigeria do today to contribute to national transformation beyond politics? One, for me, it has to be civic participation. It's not every one of us that will be involved or that will go and register to sign up for a political party. So beyond politics, civic participation is very, very important. A nation cannot move anywhere if its people do not engage in the government. And today in Nigeria, you can see that the people are alienated from the government. There's a lot of gap between the people and the government. In fact, some people do not even believe that government exists. Today in Nigeria, people are providing their own butter, they are providing their own lights, they are providing their own food, they are providing their own, even their own roads, they are providing it. So there's no presence of government in a lot of people's lives, which is why young people must ensure that when it comes to civic participation, they're also telling other people that this is the way. Also in community organizing, it's very, very important that young people in their own communities begin to actively organize the people. It is high time that we stop living the solution, or how do they say, it's time to start. It's high time we stop living the business of governance, to politicians. Each and every one of us must engage in governance. And so you ask me that, you are saying beyond politics. Politics is actually different from governance. Politics is the game which politicians engage in. Governance is everybody's problem. Governance is everybody's issues that we all have to engage in. So young people must not make the mistake of thinking that governance is an issue that they can, that is optional for them to engage in. Everybody must engage in governance. Also, in a lot of ways, in health, in education, in technology, in business, like you said, even in the corporate corporate space, every young person must ensure that they are doing their parts. The young people are not just the leaders of tomorrow; they are also the partners of today. So young people like you and I must see each other as partners of today in ensuring a better tomorrow. We're not just social actors of change. We're also a crucial part, in this nation development. So our contribution is highly needed, very highly. Even on social media, we must ensure that everything we do is actively geared towards peace building, is actively geared, even in job creation. Today young people are even already creating jobs for themselves because the government is not creating the jobs that we need to do. Let's not forget, in the issues of social reform, improvement in every society, I wanted to mention being an ambassador of the nation anywhere you go. That's one thing that young people also have to do. Beyond engaging in politics, we also have to be an ambassador of this nation. You see, when you travel outside there, they don't ask you where you're from. They don't ask you if you're from the east or from the west, from the north or from the south. The only thing they ask you, where's your passport? Where did you come from? You're a Nigerian, in the eyes of anybody outside the borders of Nigeria. So we all have to ensure that everywhere we go, we are an ambassador of this nation, positively pushing the good images that we have. It is important, and my former speaker also said it. Civic participation, the civic society, young people have a role to play in there, and the civil society organizations also have to ensure. For example, our project at Connect Up NG, we're doing a lot of documentation. We're doing a lot of work in advocacy in defending against state violence. So it's not just police brutality; it's also military officers who are going to villages, ransacking those villages, killing a lot of people. A lot of crimes that have been committed by the state and the federal government that is, just getting thrown under the table, that a lot of people are not aware about, that actively, apart from the insecurity, apart from criminal agents like terrorists, like bandits, we can go on and on, who are causing chaos in the country. Even the federal government themselves, are actively also killing Nigerians, in different places. For example, also, one of the issues you may have heard about is the one of the bombings of villagers, by the Nigerian Air Force. Those things are state violence that should not, any young Nigerians should not allow to be brushed aside. These are actually acts of violence against our own people. So one of the things we are doing is to document, make sure that these actions are documented, because if we don't have a government that is going to probe these issues today, tomorrow, with our efforts, we can do it. We can have a government that will actively visit these crimes and ensure that the people who have perpetrated these crimes against Nigerians brought to book. So those are one of the things you can do. It's not just about actively contesting for office, but also ensuring that society today is livable for each and every one of us. I've seen young people who are going in community development action. Some of them are cleaning up their societies every last week of the month. A lot of things that young people in their societies are doing today that you and I can also engage in order to ensure that we are active parts. Like one of my mentors would say, they say, at times they will not give you a seat at the table. At times they won't call you to come and sit at the table. Bring your own mat, put your own mat on the floor, sit down there and create your own table yourself. So I think that's one of the things you can also do, making sure that we're creating our own tables for us to also decide our own issues, for us to also solve our own issues, especially in our respective communities. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Renu. And just because of time, I have a last question for both yourself and Yetunde. Just as a 1 minute charge, a call to action, we like to tell people that their vote counts, that we vote. We try to dispel the narrative that, it's something that is a waste of time, because we do know it's a very tedious process and we're all working together to make the process much more efficient and effective. But what will you say to young people who are feeling tired, disillusioned, like you said? We see them leaving the country in droves. What will you say to young people that are currently around? Because of course we all cannot japa. Those that are feeling incompetent, pessimistic, and overwhelmed just by the entire system. Where do they start from? What do they do to begin to get involved? That the problems in Nigeria are just so overwhelming. What is exactly the point of getting involved? There's more evil than good, essentially. So just in a minute, what can you tell such people that are possibly even on this webinar with us? Just in a minute, please.
Well, I think I'll say something that I've always reiterated, that to you who is feeling overwhelmed, who is feeling that the entire process is tedious, who is feeling hope not be saying make I just gather some money jackpot from this country, who is thinking, well, what is the point? I'd like to remind you of the Nigerian dream. No, it's not the one where police and the military will shoot at people and try to cover it up with the help of the state government. It's not the one where we have our police officers, our security agencies who are busy killing off young Nigerians, not just even young Nigerians, but then the entire Nigerians. It's not the one where our leaders, the people who vote into power, are constantly disappointing us. The Nigerian system is putting us down. It's not the one where our dreams have been shattered and killed off every day. It's not the one where you and I will prefer to face racism in other countries rather than lose our lives in a country that doesn't value our own. It's not the one where students will be at home for almost a year. It's not the one where children and women are the shield of war and where religious intolerance is the order of the day. It's not the one where leaders are looting billions and billions in the name of government. It's not the Nigeria we have today where people have to literally struggle to even get a day meal. The Nigeria I will remind you of is the Go Better dream. That dream that our parents have often echoed to us, even while growing up, that this country will become better. At some point in time in your life, you're seeing a certain strand or a glimmer of hope when somebody will say, no worry, this country will still better. That Nigeria where injustice will be a thing of the past. That Nigeria where the common man will get justice, irrespective of the status in the society. The Nigeria where the children of nobody can become great people without the use of connection or without having to know somebody. The Nigeria where you and I can live without having to think about jackpot to another man's land. Nigeria where our best of the best will not be living to work in other countries because there's unemployment, there's even underemployment. Nigeria that will prioritize education, that will prioritize healthcare. In Nigeria where our politicians will not start to repair roads and transformers few months to the election or few days to the election because they think that we are foolish. So it is possible to have a working country. It is possible to be among the Committee of Nations for Progress instead of being constantly in the news for a third world corrupt country. So we can have a sane nation for ourselves. Our vote can count. We can have a government by the people, of the people, and for the people. So there are many instances I could give, but then there is that Nigerian dream, and that dream is not far-fetched. We can do it. Our vote can count if only we get together, our votes and make things right. Thank you.
I am personally very encouraged. Thank you so much, Renu. I'll just bring in Yetunde to please answer the same question in a minute, please.
Thank you, Renu. I mean, I'm inspired already. So when we talk about the Nigerian dream is not wishful thinking. We all can japa. We all don't have the resources to japa. But for the fact that it's a collective job. We all have to work for the kind of Nigeria that we want. We all have to do our part as citizens of this country if we want our country to work. And it's important that you believe that Nigeria can work. We need to change our minds that our Nigeria can work if we do our part. And as young people, it's very important to keep it at the back of our mind that no matter where you go in the world, Nigeria is still your home. You have to play your part as young people to ensure that regardless of wherever you are, if you want to japa, if you can afford to japa. If you cannot afford and you're back home, do your part as young people to ensure that Nigeria still remains.
Yes.
And that we actively participate in the process. This is a very, very important time in the history of our country. The 2023 election is very, very important. It's a make or mar moment for this country. And if votes do not matter, politicians won't go over their heads to buy our votes. One vote can make a difference. We have seen the situation in Osun, in Ekiti. So it is very, very important that we come out to participate in the process, not just for the election, and after the election as well. We need to hold our leaders to account for the mandates that they have. Nigeria is our home, regardless of where we are. In any part of the world, we still have to come back home to Nigeria. So please do your part to ensure that Nigeria still remains.
Thank you so much, Yetunde Bakare from Yaga and Renu Oduola from Connect Hub. I wish we had more time. There's so much to learn from your contributions, your feedback, but unfortunately, we must stick to time and we have another session coming up now. So I'll hand over to my good friend, Dami, to take over the next session. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you, Renu. I was just scribbling down notes from yourself and Yetunde. That session was quite insightful. I'm just going to go ahead to call on the next set of panelists. This conversation is going to really connect the dots from politics to everyday lives. How does politics affect our everyday lives? So I'm going to start off with Ike. Ike Lebune is an accomplished senior executive and management consultant with experience spanning both the public and private sectors in Africa and Europe. He has 10 years, in the last 10 years, he's led international development and commercialization programs for a variety of agriculture and non-agricultural initiatives in Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana. Ike, it's so lovely for you to join us today. Also, we have Joshua Alade. Joshua Alade is a positive youth development advocate and the executive director of the Nigeria Youth SDGs Network. He's currently pursuing a master's in sustainable development in the University of Bradford, courtesy the Chevening Scholarship Program. Joshua is passionate about equal access of education and decent work for young people. Thank you so much for joining us, Joshua. It's a pleasure to have you. Last but definitely not the least, we have Michael Famarotti. Is a co-founder and the head of intelligence at Steers. He coordinates all research, data data and intelligence activities at the company. He's an economist by profession with a BSc and MSc in economics from the London School of Economics. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. So I'm just going to jump right into it, setting the tone. Like I said before, many people look at politics as, as just it's for the overzealous, it's for the ethicals, it's for the corrupt, and I think Renu put it excellently when she said that many people, we don't feel the government in our everyday lives. And so I would like to call on, I'll start off with you, Ike. If you can just help us to connect the dots. Many people think that politics is merely a cluster of social activities that exist separate from the everyday Nigerian. If it has such little influence on us, why should we care? Why should we be involved in it? Can you just help to demystify this, to debunk this myth, and help to connect the dots between the political sphere and everyday life, and why, as a Nigerian, we should care about what happens in politics?
Thank you so much, Dami. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great for Youth for Nigeria to invite me here. Until recently, I would have qualified as a youth, I think, but being well into my 6th decade now, I'm sure that is behind me. That said, I'd like to thank you for having me, and I think you must be commended for having the INEC representative here earlier on, and I'd like to thank her and her employers for her participation here. Accountability, public accountability is something we see so little of in Nigeria, and it is impressive to see INEC, amongst other public institutions, starting to take some serious interest in demonstrating that here. So kudos to her. I think if she's still here, she needs to know that thanks to her, I have now followed INEC Lagos on both Instagram and Twitter. So I hope many of your followers are doing the same too. Well, you've asked me something that is really key. I mean, we've had the benefit of listening not just to one panel, but to a fireside chat that has really covered the ground here. So we here in panel 2 have the benefit of, your listeners having and being listeners to this and have heard many, many good things. I've taken some notes here. Some things that hopefully later on I will kind of challenge and debunk. But let me go straight to this issue of, voter sentiment. What you've described here is typical in terms of, what we have in Nigeria, voter and political apathy, not just from voters, but from everyone. Take anyone across the spectrum and take some sort of poll, you will hear very little in terms of clear awareness. But I think we should start by understanding why that is before we start going into, the solutions. There is a clear mistrust of the political process. And, we've only recently started to claw back from that in terms of having concerted, proactive We've had too little in terms of proactive engagement with voters, with the public here. And that has led to a mistrust. I mean, our sources of information on what actually matters politically in Nigeria tend to come from conjecture. There is this concept of they said that. And I so despise that. But if you speak to many young Nigerians, you hear them say that. You say, but they said. And when you try to establish who's they, you find out that the sources of information that overwhelm them are non-official, non-authoritative, and come from, Chinese whispers. And like I said, that space is like a vacuum. It gets filled by all this bad information coming from different sources. So, and that can be corrupted deliberately by people who understand how to, utilize that vacuum. And, you have a lot of corruption in the system, that can lead to further disillusionment and disengagement of the voting population. But there is one very key thing that I'll place at the top of the rankings here. I mean, I studied at Warwick University. It is well known for its studies in political economy studies. And one of the major proponents of that is a guy called Professor Skidelsky, who straddled both the academic and the political spheres. He was a major advisor to Margaret Thatcher in his heyday. And he disagreed with the detanglement of economics as a faculty, as a study, and politics on the other hand. And what we had in Warwick was political economics. And that was driven by people, a generation of people, and I think I'm one of those, who think that there is no politics without economics, and there is no economics without politics. And this is further lent to by one major definition of economics by a guy called Harold Lassell. Lassell says that politics, in its simplest terms, is about who gets what, when, and how. Now, if politics is really about who gets what, when, and how, then clearly politics is about, poverty, it's about unemployment, it's about the lack of opportunity. In Nigeria, we have 60% unemployment. So there is no gainsaying that there is a direct link between poverty and a lack of opportunity and a lack of aspiration to participate in advocacy, in politics in Nigeria. I've already spoken extensively about the lack of access to information. And, you can talk about the formal channels, but also through informal channels. We spent much of the first panel discussion talking about manifestos. I mean, there is very little known to most Nigerians about the contents of the manifesto. So even though Mr. Olagunju, and thanks to him, has analyzed these manifestos, I would argue that many people sitting in this virtual room don't know anything about those manifestos. They know that they're manifestos. I mean, no offense, you guys have done a great job in Youth for Nigeria, but I took a quick check of your website, and none of the manifestos are on your website. Now, this is not me pointing the finger. There are many, many organizations that should be doing that. But that's just an indication of how unimportant manifestos are to the normal Nigerian voter. And that is linked to the lack of education. We're a largely uneducated, population. Yes, we know stuff, but education isn't about just knowing stuff. It's about knowing the right things and having the right tools to grow our lives. So when it's not formalized, when it's not structured, then clearly there's going to be a lacuna there. And that is something that we suffer from in Nigeria, and we certainly feel a lack of connection to political representation. So, I mean, I could go into detail in any one of these 7 single things that I've mentioned here, but, I think our listeners kind of get the point. We are kind of in an echo chamber in this room. So, I think most of the people who have volunteered to join this meeting are people, sadly, who already are politically aware. And so there is that gap in, how do you reach out to people who are not even connected to us today, right? To what we're trying to achieve. I don't think there's anybody who is signed up here who doesn't understand the things I'm talking about. So we're talking about a largely disenfranchised population who won't even log on to events like this. So, how do we empower people to understand that politics is about getting them to shape their future? And that without participation in politics, they cannot shape their future in the discussion about politics. And I'm not talking about being a voter only, and I'm not talking about being voted for. Somebody referenced Ghana and Nigeria here, one of the speakers during the fireside. And one of the things that I'd like to mention, and again, this is me slightly disagreeing with her position, is that, look, the youth that we speak about in Azikiwe, in Enahoro, in those people, it wasn't as a result of a deliberate effort to groom our youth. They just happened to be the first beneficiaries of a colonial system that left something that was haphazardly developed in their hands. So they happened to be young, and guess what? Because they were the only ones that were formally groomed into that, they stayed politically connected today. And that is why we feel that old people continue to remain in that space. Well, it's because they were beneficiaries of a structured system. And since the colonials left, we just have not managed to replicate that model. They had an incentive at the time they left to pass something on, and they couldn't leave it in disarray. What has been our incentive as Nigerians to grow that? What was the incentive of those who took over the system to make sure that those who were coming after them would have the same opportunities and the same understanding to actually scale it up as you would a business, No one has actually done that. I mean, in a system where we don't actually have proper studies of our history, how on earth can you get people to understand their role in the political engagement? People need to understand that these things have a consequence. There is not going to be any accountability or transparency unless people participate in politics, in the discourse of politics, in voting. The lack of access to education I've spoken of, and poverty. But, in order to build a more inclusive and diverse society, which Nigeria is gradually, we're gradually beginning to understand how diverse we are as a nation, that we're not just about Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, we're not just about Muslim, Christian, there is a lot more nuance to all of that. If people, young people especially, do not understand anything, it is about how important it is that we build an inclusive and diverse society in Nigeria. And it is critical to our role as citizens that we're involved in shaping all of these. And I think I'll stop there with the 3-minute timeline you've given. I have a lot more to say, but I'll park it until we have the next
Thank you so much. I was just really nodding my head in a lot of different things you've said. You've actually spoken even about some of the other things that we're going to go into a lot more in depth. But I'm just going to piggyback off something you mentioned about some of the challenges that we're facing in Nigeria. And I'm going to direct this question to Michael. We know that there was a recession that came out of after COVID or during COVID at COVID's high, and Nigeria came out of that recession at the end of 2020. But if you compare life in Q3, Q4 2020 and life now, I think many people will tell you that it has significantly deteriorated. So from issues of fuel to now, having to buy our cash, some of these things that we never thought would be a challenge, they're posing significant challenges. What, in your opinion, is the key contributing factor for this? And how is this linked to internal political or policy issues?
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Let me just start off by saying that I'm looking forward to the day where, as an economist, panels, and we're not talking about the economic challenges and something. That seems to have been going on, and it's very unfortunate. And I think everybody here, everyone on the call and beyond, are intimately familiar what it's like living in Nigeria. So I don't think there's much else to say there. Speaking to the contributions and the reasons, I'll break them down into two. Right? There have been some external factors that have brought us here, and I'll quickly go through those. But the reality is that policy decisions have piled on those external factors and exacerbated the problem. So some of the key external factors, you mentioned COVID, right? It's very easy for people to forget just how impactful COVID was on the economy, right? Although Nigeria did not seem as affected, particularly from a public health perspective, our economy in some sense is still recovering from COVID. And some of the main ways that COVID affected the economy is one, through government finances, right? So, most Nigerians know that the federal government is still relatively reliant on oil and gas revenues to fund its budget. Right? Quite famously, around April 2020, oil prices actually went negative. People were paying each other to take oil barrels off their hands. That just showed how bad and how essentially our most valuable physical assets became worthless. Right? And we're still feeling the effects of that. Because a lot of investment stalled, and even when prices picked up, we've seen that oil volumes haven't yet recovered to pre-pandemic levels. But the other key way that Nigeria was affected by COVID is how it affected, essentially because global manufacturing and supply chains ground to a halt, that essentially kicked off the high levels of inflation that we have seen all around the world. Right. So between 2010 and 2020, inflation in the US averaged something like 1.5%. In the last 18 months, we've seen something around over 6%. So if inflation in the US is 6%, you can imagine what Nigerians is going to be, right? So COVID definitely had a big impact. More recently, the Russia-Ukraine crisis and the impact on energy prices, that has been a big issue. I mean, petrol scarcity right now can be linked directly to Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. It's unfortunate, we can't control it, but those are some external factors that must be borne in mind. Having said that, most of Nigeria's economic ills have still been self-inflicted, being honest. And I will highlight three main areas. First is in terms of fiscal policy. This one is the one that I'm most personally concerned about. And essentially, I'll make it very simple. Nigeria has recklessly and continues to recklessly spend way beyond its means without any care for the damage that that could cause. Worryingly, we have seen recently two examples of how bad the situation can get. Close to home in Ghana, anyone following that economy will know that Ghana has experienced a radical fall from grace. I remember, I believe it was December 2019, or was it 2020, where there was a famous year of the return, and it looked like Ghana was going to be the premier West African economy. Today, the Ghanaian economy is in tatters, and a big part of it is linked to the government's reckless spending. So we have an example or a warning close to home. Even worse, for those who don't follow, the story in Lebanon is a very scary tale. So one of the policies that, or the recent policies that Nigerians have felt quite hard is the Naira change, right? And the limits on cash withdrawals, and just how difficult it has been to transact, collect money, and so on. I'm sorry to tell you that we have actually been experiencing a mild version. In Lebanon, the situation is so bad that people are robbing banks, not to steal money, just to access their accounts, because the government has set draconian limits on any transaction, be it card, online, wallet, cash, and so on. So you have, or you hear stories of 70-year-old men who have heart conditions. They can't pay for their surgery, so they're going into banks with shotguns and threatening managers to give them the money in their accounts so that they can go and pay for their surgery. That's how bad things can get if we continue to recklessly spend and think that the CBN can fund this forever. So that's one big problem that we are not learning, because a certain political candidate's manifesto states that he would like to delink revenue from expenditure, essentially saying it does not matter how much we earn, we will spend what we want. That is very worrying. The second thing, on the monetary policy side, I've been speaking about this for almost 10 years now. The exchange rate, in fact, we've gotten tired. We are so used to black markets being 300 Naira more than the official rate. In fact, I don't think anybody here knows what the official rate is, because nobody cares. We all trade black markets and we have accepted it. But even though we have accepted it, the impact on international investment, and remember, I just said that we are spending too much. So we need other people to come and spend on our behalf. But our FX policies have essentially driven out international investments. So that's worrying. But the final way that we have self-inflicted this economic damage is, I've been puzzled in that in the last 10 years, Nigerian policymakers have opted for policies that, even to a layman, it is clear that the costs outweigh the benefits. Great example is this Naira change. Even though the goals are laudable, you want to curb vote buying and all these things, the people feeling the pain most are the average Nigerians. The cost greatly outweigh the benefits. You drive past, and so yesterday I was driving past a place in Lagos, and I saw a long queue of cars. And I thought, there's no petrol station around here. Why is there a queue? Only for me to drive past the bank and see that the queue was for the bank. And the queue at the ATM was even worse than the queue of cars. That is a policy that clearly the costs outweigh the benefits. Another example a few years ago was the border closure. The closure of most of our land borders to curb smuggling. Again, laudable goal. But what happened? Food scarcity. Anybody could have told you that. So time and time again, we opt for policy measures that are draconian, that are harsh, and oftentimes most impact the people that are most vulnerable. So those are some of the key ways that we have essentially cut off our nose to spite the face for no reason, and combined with the external factors, that is why today we're in a situation where, quite frankly, as an economist, Nigeria's economy is as bad as it has been in its democratic era. This is the worst point of our democracy. And that is a real shame because we're almost 25 years into democracy.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that in-depth, quick economic policy 101. I found that extremely useful. I'm just going to go quickly on to Joshua. And just, I understand that Joshua, you're a human development expert, you're studying sustainable development, and you have some experience with driving SDG goals locally. So I just want to, I know that human development is still a foreign concept, especially to a lot of people on this call, especially to a lot of young Nigerians. And just speaking back to what Ike mentioned about some of the issues that are driving political apathy is the lack of information, the lack of knowledge. So very quickly, can you just speak about so human development goals, SDGs, and interlinked objectives, and also help me to connect that to conversations about politics. So why is it important for the candidate that I want to vote for, or any candidate that I'm assessing? Why is it important for me to question their human development policies and any of the specific things that they have written in their manifestos or they're talking about in their policymaking issues, and how the level of priority they have attributed to human development issues?
Thank you so much, Dami. Good afternoon, everyone. Grateful for the opportunity to be here. Ike and Michael has done justice, and I think that I have like this really big question that I need to showcase to everyone. Just to say that, for Nigeria, one of the things that we are really so happy about every time is just talking about the size of our economy. And yeah, you could have a 500 billion economy and people are suffering, which is what we see today. And that was how the concept of the Human Development Index came about I think in 1990. And it was more of, rather than looking at how rich our economy is, can we actually ask ourselves how rich or how are the people thriving? Because it's only when you can measure how people are thriving that you can be able to say, yes, people are having the best quality of life. So it's more around looking at what are people doing, what are the opportunities that they have, and what are the choices that they are able to make. And I'll give a very good instance. So for instance, I've been in the UK for 2 years now, first studying for my master's, which I graduated last year, September. And one of the things I really understood was that first you have, I live in a council where the local council is really very, very, very conscious about how we are living, looking at what are the access that you guys have to education, to healthcare. Do you have access to, are you able to tell yourself, oh, I don't want to go to this general practice, for instance? Do the children in our council have access to good playgrounds and the likes? Do people have a place to socialize? And these are things that they take like really very important. So it's looking at how are people enjoying the good things of life? Do people have the opportunities to say, oh, this is where I want to live, or this is where I want to work, this is the way I want to commute to work, for instance? Do I want to go through Uber? Do I want to go through the train? Do I want to take a bus? Do I want to walk? And all of these things, just putting them into perspective That's like the human development approach to things, basically. And this approach takes like, it has about, I think, about 4 ways. First is looking at income itself. Like, income is really very important. It's asking ourselves, how much are people earning, for instance, because it is when you are able to state that how much someone is earning, and it's what influences their level of freedom, their level of being able to thrive, their level of being able to participate as members of the society. And I'm just doing a comparative analysis. And in the UK, for instance, the hourly wage is about 10 pounds, which is about, I think that's about 9,000 naira per hour. And if you want to also look at it in Nigeria, what's our minimum wage? Our minimum wage is like 30,000 naira per month. So imagine somebody who is earning 9,000 naira per hour and comparing with someone who is earning 30,000 naira per month. Like, there's this huge gap. So first is asking ourselves, what is the income level? How much are people earning? Really very important. Another thing is looking at welfare, for instance. How is the government supporting areas that actually support growth, areas that help people to be able to thrive, areas that help people to be able to be free? For instance, what's the kind of investment that is going into education in Nigeria? There's been a lot of strike over the last few years, like striking in different aspects of government, is in different aspects of Nigeria, whether it's in education, in healthcare, is something that you see everywhere. How much is our government investing in social amenities? Like, these are the things you look at when you're talking about welfare. And another approach is looking at the capabilities. How are people able to maybe be able to have access to things that boost them as humans? For instance, how are people able to expand their opportunities? Like, I want a better lifestyle. How is my society providing every one of these things for me? Do I have the choice to say I want to go cashless, or I want to actually use cash? How is my society providing every one of these things for me? And another thing is asking ourselves around basic needs itself, which is really very important. How are people able to access the basic needs of life, like access to water, access to food, access to public transport, access to healthcare, access to educational service itself? So these are like the 4 things that the human development approach looks like. And for Nigeria, this is not something that our politicians look at. We're in a country whereby people are still, we have the average politician who is still, how do they say this thing, commissioning creation of roads. You build road and you are commissioning it. You build an hospital. It's not like this hospital it has the amenities that people need to be able to save life. It's just a building, and people are commissioning every one of these things. And then we're asking ourselves, is this what we need? Somebody's coming up and is taking out his or her manifestos, and the person is saying, we'll build roads, we'll help you to do this and that. How is this in measuring our income? How is it looking at our welfare itself? How is it looking at even the needs of people that are physically challenged, for instance? Every one of these things is really, really very important when we look at the human development approach, and which is something that is really foreign to Nigeria. And I think that this should be the table topic when we're having these conversations around who are we voting for in less than 3 weeks' time. And it also links back to the Sustainable Development Goals. And with the SDGs itself, the SDGs is saying, how can we ensure a world without poverty? How can we ensure that human life, plant life, and that the sustainability for every one of these individual life, whether it's human or animal or it is plant life? How are we also able to ensure that people who are living in rural communities are able to enjoy the benefits that people who are living in urban areas are enjoying? How are we able to ensure that whether you have an education or not, you have access to the richness of life, which is the whole concept of the Human Development Index itself? And if you look at on this rating, so the funny part is that when I did my my master's dissertation, one of the things I looked at was asking myself, how are young people in Nigeria and India have been able to lead the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals? And I looked at the Human Development Index itself for Nigeria. Like, Nigeria is ranked 151 on the Human Development Index. And looking at also on our achievement of the SDGs, we are ranked at about the same number. And one of the things I was able to find out is that for countries who are actually prioritizing taking the human development approach, the people are living fair, the people are living nice, like countries like Finland, countries like Denmark, people who are prioritizing, looking at what's the richness. So for instance, you're having these countries, they're now asking themselves, how can we even make life better for people who are physically challenged? Like, you now have people talking about diversity, they're talking about equality and inclusion, because they've been able to get things right. So they're not trying to fine-tune the finest things. But here in Nigeria, we're still asking ourselves, people are still on petrol queue. People do not even have access to money. People are hungry. So these are things that when we are trying to measure progress, when we're trying to ask ourselves, how are we doing well as a nation? We're asking ourselves, how are people free, for instance? It's really very important. And for the SDGs, it's saying by 2030, we want to have a world without poverty. We want to have a world whereby gender equality is key. We want to have a world whereby there are sustainable cities and community. We want to have a world where there's accountability between government and the people itself. And this is the areas that we are struggling as a nation. We have a country, we have leadership that are not accountable to the people. And the reason why they are not accountable to the people, basically, it is because, just as Ike said earlier on, it's because of a lack of education. People do not even know what their rights are. People do not even understand that government is supposed to be working for you. Not just working for you, government is also supposed to be working with you. Before policies come up, there should be a conversation, there should be an education process, there should be a trial, there should be a town hall meeting. Town hall meetings are not just for political gatherings. It's not just to show up how many people know you. It's about saying, how well are we listening as a government? How well are we listening to our people? And it is in every one of these conversations that people are able to correctly judge and say, oh, this government is actually going to listen to us. And they're listening to us, meaning that they are willing to work in partnership with us, which is what the sum total of the Sustainable Development Goals is all about. And for us as young people, I feel like this is a conversation that we should be having. We should be asking people who are in the decision-making process, people who are lawmakers, people who are trying to contest for the presidency, for the state's House of Assembly and the likes, asking them, how are you going to ensure that we as a people enjoy the richness of life? How are you going to ensure that your government is paying good attention to the Sustainable Development Goals? Yes, we cannot do away with what has happened with COVID. We cannot do away with what's happening right now with the Ukraine war that has actually crippled the global supply chain. But it's also saying, show us the plan that you are listening to us. Show us the plan that you are not just saying, oh, I'm the renewed hope, or I am, it is possible, or the other, I can't remember the other acronym. It's more of saying, this is what I want to do for you, because I understand that income is important. I understand that your welfare is important. I understand that you need access to basic needs. And this is the approach that I am going to take. And for us as young people, we need this education to rightly be able to hold our leaders accountable. We need them to know that as Nigerians, we belong here. Very, very important. Most people do not feel that they belong here as Nigerians. They don't think that Nigeria has their best interests at heart. Like, I'll just give a quick run. Like, I arrived the country on Monday, and when I got here now, I was really scared. I felt a sense of unbelonging, but I know that this is where I've been. Like, I've lived the last 30 years of my life before I traveled in Nigeria. So if I don't belong here, if I'm not able to create a Nigeria where people can be able to thrive, what can I do as somebody, as a young person? How can I contribute to the policy-making process? How can I be able to ensure that people are even aware of their rights as Nigerians? Because it is when we have all of this education that we can build on the momentum, maybe not for this election, but for the next coming election, because people are now aware of their rights and what the government is supposed to be doing for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. I'm just going to use that to, we are over time now, so I'm just going to use that to just close up. And I have I would like each of the panelists to give like a closing remark, and I would like your remark to touch on two things. The first thing being that in this whole policy conversation, if we were to go, I mean, people study masters on policy, and so it's something that you can study for years. But if you were to just advise just a voter or people who are here, people who might be listening to the recorded version later, and just tell them what main things should you look out for when assessing a candidate's competence. Because many people, when you ask them, what is the basis for you to determine who to vote for, they'll say competence, but how are you assessing competence? So if you were to just advise people on what they should look out for when assessing competence, what would you say? And then my second question would then be, on the other end, for the political candidates, if we have so many problems, have a myriad of problems. Josh talked a little bit about it, Michael touched in as well, and so did Ike. What would you say should be like the top priorities for the first, I know they do this whole 100 days in office thing, but 100 days is not a lot of time. So let's say for the first year in office, that should be prioritized, something that will, so low-hanging fruits that could drastically improve the quality of life that Nigerians are living. So that's two things that I'd like for you to touch in your closing remarks. And I will start from Ike.
Thank you again, Dami. I don't know how long we have for this, whether it's a 1 minute close, but I just want to say that we live in a context where, we're taught that in biology, living things react to stimulus as opposed to things that are non-living. So you'd expect that over time, there'd be some direct consequence of an action. So whether it's light to photosynthesis or whether it's food and nutrition to growth. In psychology, we learn that, we have incentives and sanctions. Now, somehow there's something here that bucks that trend, and I can't understand what it is. I mean, we are not an immature nation in terms of time since independence. So what is it that is unique about Nigeria that means that a nation of 200 million or so people haven't learned lessons from our past that we can apply? And it's almost as if there is actually a direct and purposeful effort to prevent that natural maturity cycle from taking place here. Because you see it happen elsewhere. Again, we talk about Kenya, Ghana, South Africa. Why doesn't it happen here? Is there a political class whose aim is to prevent knowledge being spread to Nigerians, accountability coming to Nigerians? But let me just come very quickly to your two questions. I think it was Joshua who was speaking earlier on about human development indexes. It's very instructive that you have a candidate, one of the major candidates, who says, confirm and verify, go to my state. He doesn't say go online. He doesn't say you can find it here, there, or anywhere. He says go to that state. Where? Now, this is not impeaching the character or the importance of having that candidate, say those things, but it is, I guess, one of the functions of a dysfunctional system, if you may, that there is no where you can find that information if you want to look at it now. This human development index you speak of, what tools do we have for not episodic collection on a project of that information, but continuous collection of that information and putting it out? I mean, there must be something that tells us that during the 8 years in power of a governor or somebody who held power in a state, you could actually track and trend, information on human development in that state, either during, and you recognize that sometimes the impact comes after, or immediately after the 8 years they had in office. You can't find that on any of our politicians. So when you talk about track records, where are you going to get it from? So I was going to start by saying, number one is a track record. Then there's media coverage, there's endorsements, but it almost seems that none of these things on their own is going to give us what we need. And I think instead of laboring you with going through all of that, I'd say, look, what we need to look out for is when we hear these people speaking at town halls, when we hear them speaking at debates for those who choose to attend, I think one of the key things we want to find out, not just for the election cycle, but for governance, who intends to continue with a systemic way of sharing information on their successes beyond 100 days, beyond the electoral cycle, and over the course of the four years. Now, that's the person you need to be listening to, because they're the ones who is saying, I will be held to account. Because until you put in place those systemic things that allow you to be held to account, look, there is that stimulus. If you cannot be held to account, then there's nothing to drive you to deliver anyway. So that is a systemic failure. So the first thing we need to be looking for is, who is the person who is most interested in developing those systems that will be there to hold them to account beyond the electoral cycle. When you find that, you've probably started your journey towards finding the right person. And what would the priority be for me if I was to look out? I've already said what it is in a nutshell, because you see, systems matter. I know everyone could talk about, make one major move to shift something in the economy, whether it's dropping subsidy, whether it's the removal of the dualization of the exchange rates that Michael spoke to earlier on. Those things are good. They have long-term repercussions that need to be studied and analyzed, and we need to make sure that the pain pill isn't bigger than, the swallowing the pain pill isn't going to be bigger. Like, everyone says how good a policy the Naira, recoloring is. But, we all know that the execution has been, a total mess. So having those policies and, speaking to their benefits is one thing. Execution is another. So I would say that what we need the most in Nigeria today is actually something quite simple around giving a sense of ownership. There's an extent to which we need to see a leader that brings people in. It could be from their utterances. It could be from their appearance as a person of the people. It could be just something that allows us to start to engage with our leadership through their simplicity in their messaging, through their simplicity in their behavior, almost appearing to have an open government that allows people to speak. And that's why I spoke to the tools of accountability. I think anything, that starts to show Nigerians through, communications, through slogans even, that, look, we belong to Nigeria, and Nigeria matters to us, will be more important than the economic strategy that Michael speaks of, or the systems and tools that Joshua and I speak of. They're important, but I think that mental connection is the most important thing that you can start to do, in the first 100 days. When people talk about Buhari's first term in office with Idiabo, they remember, most importantly, war against indiscipline. It was almost like a values-driven scheme. It didn't necessarily work very well, but it's just a demonstration of how having something that, attaches to social values is a lot more important than all those other things, because that will define the context in which economic renewal can take place. And I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Ike. I think that is very key, talking about the systemic structures that are put in place to essentially just enhance the accountability and that sense of ownership from not just because I can remember who spoke to, we all forget that the president it's not just about the president. There's so many other different offices. So even when it comes to policy implementation, fine, the president may have given the go-ahead for that policy, but it's down to the ministry, it's down to the different executives under that ministry for the execution. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to hand over to Michael. Please go ahead with your closing remarks.
All right, thank you very much, Damnari. Good news is that my answer to both questions is the same. I'm going to speak about what Nigeria needs from an economic institution perspective. So I tend to agree that one of policies themselves, it's not about those in low-hanging fruits, right? It's about building the right long-term economic institutions. I focus on economic institutions because that's where my expertise is, right? So these are the three big things that Nigeria needs. So when you're assessing candidates, try and gauge, is this a person that can deliver them? And as a candidate, you want to build capacity, or more importantly, bring the people around you that can help you execute and build these institutions. Like you said, it's not just about person. So three things. The first thing is a clear commitment to a market economy. I was talking to someone recently, and he spoke about how before the recent APC administration, we felt that there was an implicit consensus that we all agreed that market economies are the way forward. prices, free markets, capitalism. It's not perfect, but it's been tried and trusted in Africa and so many places. And then this administration has essentially showed us that no, not everybody agrees with that. And they've shown time and time again that they will override market outcomes. They will override market mechanics, right? We see it FX, we see it subsidies, we see it left, right, and center. So the first thing is you want someone who has shown a clear commitment to allowing market outcomes play out and then interfere after to redistribute if necessary. So practical examples, remove subsidies for petrol. If you want to help a certain group, target them, for example, with food vouchers and food stamps that have certain criteria that eliminates people like you who shouldn't qualify, right? So clear commitments to market economy. Second thing, and I mentioned this before, clear commitment to fiscal discipline. Nigeria doesn't need anybody who doesn't realize that the same rules of personal finance and business sustainability apply in a similar way to a country. Resources are not infinite. The chickens will come home to roost. So pay attention to how people plan on spending and how they plan on raising money, because it's easy for someone to say, we will raise not all revenues. How? No one has been able to do that so far. What is your magic trick for that? And then you find out that there are not all revenues is CBN funding. That's the problem. So clear commitment to fiscal discipline. And then the third thing is a candidate or an administration that shows a clear understanding and humility that the government cannot really do anything to reignite the Nigerian economy. And that what they do is inspire confidence. The institutions that we've been speaking about become so important, so much more important. Removing petrol subsidy is less about the act and more about the signal. Moving to a single market-driven exchange rate is less about the act and more about the signal. These signals inspire long-term confidence. They bring investments. They can help reverse the Japa trend. These are the things that matter. The government alone does not have the resources, the knowledge, anything to reignite the economy. So it needs to inspire confidence, trust in others to come and help out. And that's a key thing. And that sometimes starts from just the personality of the candidate and the posture of the administration, right? The change mantra that this government came in on was powerful. It did compel people. It did convince people. I'll let you decide if they follow through. But for a time, there was renewed hope in Nigeria. There was renewed belief. People moved back to the country in anticipation of a new Nigeria. That thing is powerful. These are the people that bring the resources and expertise that can reignite the economy. So that is the most important thing for me, and that's where I'll end. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's definitely, just speaking to your last point, there's a lot of uncertainty just with the way that the government does it. I remember this, my alma mater actually wanted to open a campus in Africa, and they were looking at Nigeria because Nigeria has most of the African students come from Nigeria. And after about 3 or 4 years in going back and forth with the regulatory authorities, they said that they needed to have a hospital, a religious center, different things in campus. They had to start really big. They just wanted to start small. And so they moved away, and now they've opened in Ghana, and all Nigerians, most of their students in Ghana, like 70% of students in Ghana are from Nigeria. And so that just speaks to some of the things about just making just that ease in the regulation and just removing some of the bottlenecks that discourage investors from coming in, even not just international investors, but local investors as well, I think is very key. Thank you so much for that, Michael. Hand over to Joshua.
All right, thank you so much, Dami. I'll just speak on the aspect of participation and being open to communicating or responsiveness to the people. It's something that we have lacked over the last 8 years. Nigerians have not been actively involved in the decision-making process. You want a president that listens to you, someone who speaks to you, somebody who is accountable to you, somebody who knows that I am here to serve you and you are not here to serve me. So that's something we should be looking out for, basically. I'm sure if we have a president or a leader that is really open to learning, listening to the people, accountable to the people, Nigeria will be better. And the last part is I think it's also just it's just the same thing. It's all around somebody who has integrity, basically. Really, really very important. It's if you look at the other developed countries in the world, these are things that they hold in high esteem for their leadership. You have a country whereby somebody had to leave office because he or she used a personal email to send something that was sensitive from the government. Like, that's accountability. That's saying this, we have a leadership that we can actually trust to do the right thing. Even if the people have to compel them to do, you know that it's a government that is actually listening to people. So you need to vote in that person, somebody who is going to put in our welfare, who is going to look at how are we developing, how are we maximizing the richness of life as Nigerians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. I think that second point links to what Ike mentioned about building systemic structures that promote accountability. I think it's sort of key, because sometimes when people hear, oh, somebody who has integrity, what is integrity? How do you measure integrity? How do you know that somebody has integrity? Someone could have had integrity in this other role, but now the role of the president is all encompassing. You're the final say for the most part. I mean, where bills are concerned, the legislature could frustrate you. But when you're then in that position of much influence, access to a lot of resources, then that integrity that you might have had before is now then put under question. So that's why it's important for you to put some of those systems in place, that even when you're leaning towards doing something that's selfish, leaning towards doing something that may not be for the benefit of the people that your constituents, then the structure that you have put in place kind of whip you back into shape. And I think that's very, very key. But thank you all, everybody. We've come to the end of this webinar. I know that we first wanted to do it physically in Lagos, but because of the marathon, we're unable to do that. But thank you so much for joining. Thank you to all of our panelists for their insights. We've been scribbling and taking a lot of notes. This recording is going to be available on YouTube. But we'll circulate the links if you want to share it with your communities as well. But thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.